It's Smile Abdul-Salam, beatsboxingmayhem.com. I'm here with a very special guest, as you can probably tell by the big smile on my face. I'm very excited. This woman crafted, I believe, one of the seminal albums of the early 2000s. She's had a wonderful career, very eclectic, can do rock, can do hip hop, can do R&B, can do soul. Complete Renaissance woman. I'm here with none other than Philly's own Reese. Reese, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. And as most people will know, what we are talking about today will be the 20th anniversary of your debut album, How I Do. Now, I have to admit, when I first realized it was the 20th anniversary, I kind of cringed a little bit because it's like, is this really 20 years since I was listening to this in college? It's like time flies. So I wanted to know on the artist end, how was it for you? Did you feel like, wow, this 20 years has flew by, or does it feel like it's been 20 years since you started your career?
Both, both. Um, One, I definitely cringe as well because I'm like, oh my gosh, but it's very bittersweet, it's great because, the music industry was so different, when I started and, um, I was able to actually develop as an artist where I think now, they just want you like fresh, ready to go, perfect, It's
Right.
like the whole thing of like, if you two, if you decided, if you had a U2 album and you listened to their first album, if they didn't get to like their third, fourth, fifth album, we would have never known that they were as great as they were. And I feel like I came up in the time just at the cusp, like the very end of it, where there was a thing called artist development. There was they believed in artists where they said, okay, we want to see you develop, you know, um, naturally, we want to see you, get better and better versus now. But, there's a lot of benefits to now. We have the internet, we have like all that access to just be able to put your music out. It's always like, a double-edged sword, but I'm really proud of the project I did 20 years ago. I don't have any regrets as far as how we made the record. It wasn't all peachy clean. It wasn't all like, the best of times. It was like the best of times and the worst of times at the same time.
Right.
But also, I just feel like I'm happy about it at the end of the day. I never really got a bad review. With It's like one of those situations. 20 years later, I look back and if you know who I am, you like it, but you may not know who I am. But if you know who I am, I haven't had like literally, I haven't had one like negative, encounter, or I think I literally had one bad review and then like 5 years later, the person reached back out to me and they apologized for it because they said they
Uh,
listened to the album still and they were like, I gave you like a mediocre review and I'm sorry because I liked it. So I feel really great, I do wish that it was more successful when it first came out.
mhm.
Um, but I also yeah, I wish it was more successful when it came out, But I feel like I made a quality piece of art that people still, if they discover it, they love. And that never gets old, that never gets tarnished. That's always like the best part, for me. Because I can look back and have that respect, and it was just it's a great album still, you know?
That's very true. And one thing that was unique to me, so you're signed to MCA. So
Mhm.
I know when you're signed, you're thinking, hey, I'm going to work with all these new different producers. I'm going to have all these writers on my debut album. So they took a different approach to me. They gave you one writer that we all know is Santigold, and Martin Doc McKinney was the producer. And then you're also the singer and the writer too. So really just three of you guys. And you're working with the producer and the writer that's really unproven on the big scale like that. So how was your first impressions of that? Like what was your first reaction and what was their first reaction? Were you both like looking at each other like, how did this happen? Or was everybody excited, like, okay, we're gonna do something great, like right off the bat?
Well, first of all, just like you have no idea, but it wasn't like anything you said. They, I'm thinking you're saying it's the label. No, it wasn't like that. It was
Mm,
more like I decided I wanted to make music. Santi was a childhood friend. her father was a lawyer. My dad needed lawyers.
Okay. Right.
So he, you know, hired him as a lawyer and like set him up in his first like office and everything, you know, like, you know, because her dad was pretty much like from the streets too, but he like had a situation that kind of, I guess, put him on the straight and narrow, and then he became a lawyer, you know. And but still, you know, when you're from the hood and you recognize another one, you like, okay. So they linked up, they were friends. We're their children. We happen to be friends. And one summer, I just was like, oh, I need to get an internship because I was in Temple University, and her dad's was a prominent lawyer in Philadelphia. He's passed away as well. My father has also. And you know, I went to him to get an internship, and he gave me hooked me up with a great internship at a financial institution, and because I was a finance major at the time, and he was like, but you know, he's like, but yeah, I got you on that. He's like, but let me tell you, Santi is she in New York City. She working for this big label. She working for Sony, and he's, you know, he's telling me all this. He's like, yeah, you need to hook up with her. And you know, everyone knew I sang because I always sang as a kid, you know, but I didn't have any famous people in my family. I didn't have anyone in the music business or anything. I just liked to sing, and my mom recognized it and was like, okay, you like to sing, you like to play tennis, you want to do the saxophone. Like I was that kid that I wanted to try everything. And they were fortunate enough that they had the money for me to do it, and I landed on playing tennis and singing, you know. And I made a demo tape with her. He was like, "Yeah, you should hit her up or whatever." And I made a demo tape, and about, I'd say, Tsunami, Sitting Back, and I want to say there's like one other song that was on my demo tape. My first ever demo tape I ever made. It was 6 songs. And Santi had like, she was working at Sony. She realized that she could like get me a demo deal. And that demo deal was like, I think they gave me like $13,000. And with that money, I went in the studio and recorded 6 songs. And that demo, she worked it out that afterwards I would, if Sony didn't sign me, then after a certain period of time, I could own the demo and I could shop it elsewhere. And that's what happened. And I shopped it elsewhere, and I got picked up by MCA. It was a slight bidding war, but I went with MCA. I think Rough House was also a part of this bidding war, and Virgin Records.
Okay.
But I went with MCA because they were giving me the most money, to be honest. And it was the biggest situation. And 2, if not 3 of those songs made it to the album. And we just built off of that. And really, you know, how everything went, it was, you know, really Santi was like kind of the glue to it. She helped me find my manager at the time. And she also helped me find Doc to work with. And so we did this demo, then we showed it to him. We were like, we want you to do the, you know, the album. And we went in and worked on it. And it wasn't easy. Like, you know, it was, you know, I had a new management who now, his name is Corey Smith, great guy. He actually manages Dave Chappelle right now and Vince Staples, you know. We all know Santi does her thing, you know, she became an artist. Doc, he went on to do a lot of stuff, and he did like The Weekend and stuff, but it wasn't easy. Like, you know, 4 strong personalities, you know. We had a friend, no, my manager had a friend named Naeem Ali who was working at MCA at the time, but he was in the marketing department. Well, we wanted to have our people. So, because we knew we wanted to make an album we wanted to make. And so we didn't want anybody to stop us. So we got him out of the marketing department to be our A&R. So we kind of created our own little thing. And then so we had everything right. We had a budget. So we just went in and did an album together. It had nothing to do with the label. They just provided the money. So when we brought them the project, they were like, they didn't know what they had. They just were like, okay, let's do the demographic work and let's see what's going to be the single. But if you listen to the album has so many different genres that basically every department had a single. Rock pop said this should be the single. Urban said this should be the single. You know, so it was just like they didn't know what to do. So instead of servicing it properly, which would be just start with one and see how it goes. They just kind of like said, oh, we're gonna, take it back, scale it back a bit. But they didn't scale back on how much money they gave me to make the album or how much they gave us to make the album, that was great. But, having four personalities, we had, we all were in the very beginning of our careers. Santi was an A&R at Sony, A&R assistant at Sony. And then she turned into a songwriter. And she was like, I started writing these songs, why don't you come sing them? And that's how I did the demo. Corey, he was managing us at the time. I met him at a party. She took me to a party and was like, she was like, do you like this guy? And then we went to another party that same night. And she introduced me to Fa and Da'u that ended up managing Bilal. And I went with the other guy because I went with Corey because he was where I'm usually at a party in the DJ booth trying to tell the DJ what to play. So I said, I want that guy. And he came over. She set up a meeting at her apartment in Brooklyn and on South Portland in Fort Greene. And he was like, sing me a song. Let me hear you sing. This is the guy, Corey, so he can be my manager. And I sang Trust in Me by Etta James. And afterwards, he kind of just was like spooked, and I'm like, is it cool? And he's like, I'm definitely going to manage you. He said, you just sang my mother's favorite song. And I was just like, wow, that's random, So he was just like, I'm all in, like you sing mother's favorite song. Santi was beginning writing songs and she had like an eclectic, cool thing with her. I was honestly the least experienced as far as music industry, and all that stuff. So they kind of, they like molded me very, in a way that allowed me to be this type of artist, and I just kind of took it from there. I always could sing, no one taught me that or whatever, but, so we all had a piece and we came together kind of like Voltron, but it wasn't easy, a lot of egos, from, Santi and from Doc and, it got to a point where we had to like kick her out the studio at the end. Like it was real, like the last 2 weeks, but, she was the glue, I can't front. She was the glue. She wrote songs that I loved. She worked with me to, so I could perform them a certain way and really gave me my start, so I owe a lot to her, but it wasn't easy. I'll put it that way. It was not easy. A lot of arguments, a lot of laughs, a lot of good times, but my friends, they just thought I was like depressed when I was making the album, it was like that bad, but at times it was that good. Once we all got together and we did something that we loved, undeniable, but it was definitely cutthroat. Like if someone did something, musically that sounded like anybody else's, we were like, that's whack. Cut that out. Like, nah, that's not gonna work. Like we were cutthroat. We were not PC. We were not PC about it. We were like, that shit whack. Like we didn't care whose feelings got hurt. It just was like, but when we all agreed, that's what you heard. That's when the song was done.
Which song would you say was the most difficult to complete, where there was so much back and forth about how it sounded until you guys finally got it right?
Well, that's the thing. That wasn't really it. It was more about, because in general, we did 3 to 5 versions of each song. The way Doc was doing music at that point, the song would get written one way and then we'd be like, okay, cool, that's cool. So what's another way we can do the same song? And it would have a whole nother version. So we had like 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 different versions of a song. So when you do that, you pretty much are doing every idea you can possibly think of, doing it completely, and then sitting back listening to it. And usually when you do that, which one is the best. It's like pretty undeniable, but Golden Boys, that actually was one that started out, as a Etta James remix. Somehow, some way that was going to be like, we were trying to like get a song on a movie soundtrack and they were like, oh, do a cover. And we were like, oh, let's do, a cover of a Etta James song. And it wasn't Trust in Me. I think it wasn't a different song, but we but Golden Boy's beat came out and we were like, this beat is like too good to just be a cover. We're
Right.
gonna write something different, you know? But it was more like, you know, at first when you work on something, everyone's being nice and everybody's being cool about things. But then once you get more into it, and it was really more about the love for the music that made us like this, because we all wanted it to be great. But some of us thought that we knew more than others. And some of us thought, you know, like I know more and what I'm thinking is cooler. So it would be like that kind of thing. And then towards the end, in order to just get it done, we were just like, we have to leave this studio, go to Toronto. And me and Doc, we finished the album together. We had to leave Santi like out of it. But, you know, with that said, it's, if artists and musicians are a lot more honest about the process, they'll know that when you have a creative in a team like that, it's just really because they have such a strong opinion, and that's okay. That's important to have. It's actually necessary. And also because they have a different you know, they start developing on their own as more of an artist, and they realize, wait, I want to do it too, you know. So it's like they take more ownership. So I can't even be mad at her, you know. It was just like an artist being an artist and really giving a shit, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm. How was
And
your friendship after that? After, you finished it without her, that was it.
that
I
was
was
that was
wondering.
it. But you know, we're still cool, you know, as far as like after time goes by, time heals everything, you know.
Right.
And we're still cool, but we don't speak. And I'm definitely open to working with her again, but I don't think she's open to working with me again and just being in that situation. So, you know, you go your own ways, and you know, that's what it is. And she went on to create great music and do her thing. And you know, you know, I hope, I mean, I think we're all proud of each other, you know. And I think Doc the same way, you know. um that was a bittersweet ending too, like in a weird way. um but you know, you got to realize that people are people, and before you get to them to create a project or to even work with them, they have issues, like
Sure.
before they come into the room. Like everyone's like human, and when you're working on something creative and you're using like your real feelings, all of that comes out. Everything you've been through comes out when you're doing something important, because you need that to make it sometimes, you know.
Right.
But I don't regret it. And you know, I just honestly think like shit happens. Like that's kind of how things happen sometimes. And it doesn't mean you can't make something great. and and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't push through, you know. Like you have to
Right.
sometimes push through it. But you know, because it was our destiny to do an album like that, you know. Everyone benefited from that, you know, and went on in their career. So
Absolutely. And I wanted to point something out to you that you'll find interesting. So on Twitter, I think like last week, I put a portion of the Day Save Vision video up there just to let people know I was going to be interviewing you. We're going to be talking about the album. So I have like boxing and film people, and there's still people, like you said, that are discovering you for the first time. And there's this older guy. He listened to it and he left this message response to me where he said, "This is a revelation. This reminds me of a modern day Stevie Nicks. And I can't wait to hear more about the band." And it made me think, you made the Refried Mac album later on, with the Fleetwood Mac covers. So that made me wonder, was that the, because I never, I didn't catch my ear at the time. Was that your intention of making that song sound like a Stevie Nicks song?
it wasn't my intention, but it definitely was Santi's and Doc's intention.
Got
And
it.
they were, for that song, they were, you know, they like Santi wrote most of the album, minus like Ice King and 700 Miles. You know, she was like predominantly the writer. I sang everything and kind of, you know, and I influenced the sound in a way where she made things sound more R&B, or allowed me to do a little bit more things, you know. Um, and Doc was the producer, you know. And we had my manager Corey kind of like stopping and starting things, like being like, "It's done, you guys, don't work on it anymore. Or, it's not done, keep working on it," you know. He was kind of like the gatekeeper and trying to keep everybody cool and managing everybody's personalities and stuff. But that song, yeah, like they definitely, you know, as far as I knew, I heard a lot of Stevie Nicks' music, but I just didn't know that's who it was. So I had heard Dreams, I heard Brian, I heard all these songs growing up, but I didn't know, like, I didn't necessarily go look for Fleetwood Mac or go look for Stevie Nicks. So, and I personally wasn't thinking I was singing like anybody. I just was singing the songs, you know, and the direction that I was getting, I was trying to go towards that direction. But not until the song came out did people really start saying, "Oh, that's who you sound like." And at first, I was like Stevie Nicks. I was like, I sound like a guy, you know. And then
Right.
when I really listened to her older stuff, that's when I was like, oh, they're talking about this song and this. Oh, I know these songs, you know.
Mhm.
So I didn't intentionally do it, but I can't say that Doc and Santi were unintentional about it. I don't know. We'd have to ask them. But but I think they knew, you know. I think Doc for sure was like hitting on it for sure, and he was producing it. Um, but they definitely heard that in my voice, and you know when you hit a sweet spot, you know. And but afterwards, you know, hearing all of those, you know, oh, you sound like Stevie Nicks, you sound like Stevie Nicks, it led me to do that EP. And Doc also had, you know, had a hand in that. He's like, oh, you should do this. Like you should do her songs. And so then it got me, you know, got me going. And that's pretty much where I got the idea to do the EP. But I executed it with a different producer named Tom Spiker, who's amazing, a Philadelphia producer. And he came with the sound of that EP as far as the music. You know, he called it like pots and pans or something. And he's, you know, he has an amazing studio in Philly, all vintage equipment. He plays every instrument. He pulled in Steve McKee and Chuck Treese for drums. And that's what we made. And it was the most chill record. It was the happiest time I made an album and made music. I would go to his house, sit there for like 3 hours, drink beers, online shop, and like sing for like an hour. And he was doing all the other music stuff, and I'd just leave and come back, and he would be like, oh, doing this and doing that and playing and all this. And that's what came out, you know. And it was just a yin to a yang.
Amazing, amazing. Now, what about the sequencing? Was that something that you guys control completely as well too? Because the album, just the way
That's
it flows, is fantastic.
We made that album. We had all the songs, and then we were trying to figure out what the order should be. And once we figured out the order, we realized we needed to make songs faster, and some slower, and some this and some that. And we went back in and did that. And it's funny because my least favorite song on the album is like people's favorite. And I'm wondering if you think this too, but Tsunami, that was like my least favorite song at the time. Like,
Really?
I mean, I don't know what was wrong with me because it's a great song, but I went into the studio that day not wanting to sing that song. And they were like, that for some reason, that was the only song that worked. We had older, you know, it was back in the day. So like we weren't using Pro Tools and all that. We were using like 2-inch reels, like real machines. Like we weren't, it was very much done old school way. And that was the only song that they could get working. And I was like, I'll sing the song, but I'm singing it one time. So y'all better get this take right. And I sang it once, and it's like, there you go. And it worked.
Sorry, music.
But there was we had a chopped and screwed part to the record that we ended up taking out. We had it for the demo, but we didn't use it for the album. It's crazy. Yeah.
Interesting. So, what about that punk rock sequence at the end? That secret song after the pause, after Tsunami. Whose idea was that?
That was definitely Santi's. And we were like, where else are we going to put it in the record? Because were we going to have it as the third song, like before, you know, 700 miles? Like, where is that song going to fit on the record? So we were like, oh, let's just make it a hidden track.
That felt so 90s. You know, in the 90s, you had secret, you know, songs like that. That's what it reminded me of, like immediately when I heard it. So, it was a fantastic choice.
That's exactly why we did it. And, you know, but, and Doc was really into punk rock stuff too, because he had like a punk band when he was like 14 or something like that, you know? So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Now, what about the cover? Now, the cover, when you look at it, it reminds me like of a French, like romance noir type of thing where you're looking back. It's almost haunting because it's in black and white. Was that your guys' idea as well?
It was for that album, you know, for the cover, back in that day, it was, you know, it was a whole team of people, right? Like your creative department. And they said to me, Reese, you know, you have to shoot the cover of your album. We're going to help you find a photographer. look at all these books. Back in the day, they would have these big black books that had all, you know, it was like all their images, like their lookbook to say, hey, this is my work. So these books were like this thick, like this big, like huge. And all the agents had them that represented photographers and represented hair people and represented makeup people. And they just hit up an agency and they said, okay, let's see the books of different photographers. And I looked through like 10 books and I chose the 2 people I liked. I was like, I like this one and this one. And it was Mark Baptiste and Ellen von Unworth. That's who I narrowed it down to. And you know, I didn't know who these people were. I just was like, I like this photo and like this photo. And the only reason why I picked Ellen over Mark Baptiste is because I felt like Mark Baptiste, amazing photographer. I ended up shooting with him for other things, but I noticed that it don't matter what you look like. He's gonna make you look like a model. I don't know how this man does it. I don't know what he's doing with magic, but he makes everybody look amazing. And I'm gonna be honest, I felt like I already look good, like I'm cool. So I wanted to go with more character and more vibe and more essence of like atmosphere and just something else. And you know, but I did want to look great in it, you know. But I felt like I'm okay, you know, I'm cool looking, like I'm good on that. I don't need any, like my face isn't like this and I just need someone to make it look, you know. So I just was like, let me go with this lady because I just liked how she shot. And like you hit it on the nail, like, you know, she's German, so she is European, phenomenal photographer. I just had no idea at the time like how big a deal it was to have her. And but they got her and she shot everything with like 4 different cameras. And that shot was shot with like a little camera like this big. She had like 3 different cameras she would shoot with. But that shot camera was like this little big, the little black camera, like, you know, 35mm film or some shit. And we shot it in Chinatown because they decided where I was going to shoot, like she did. They came up with like a whole concept, like, oh, let's shoot, you know, in a place where she looks completely different than everyone else. Chinatown. You know, I'm Black girl. Like ain't no black mugs there. So it worked out. And the styling was done by Lisa Cooper, who is like the 8th wonder of the world on styling. The makeup was done by a Spanish girl. I believe her, I can't remember her name, but she was amazing. I believe her last name is like Gonzalez or something. The hair was done by Chucky Amos, who is like phenomenal hair guy now. Like you guys should Google all these people. They're like at the top of their game, amazing. And yeah, and you know, it was a big deal shoot, you know, and we went and did it in one day and it was an all day, all night thing. And I love the images. You know, and I was lucky enough years later to actually get all of them from that shoot. Someone at the label was going to throw them away because they were told like, oh, throw this stuff away. And the person said they knew me and they got my number and they said, I'm going to call her. And they were like, would you like these photos? And I was like, hell yeah, I will be there in 10 minutes. Like, and I drove up and he gave me the whole thing. So I have every photo from that shoot till this day.
To follow up on that, what you had said earlier about the whole process being bittersweet, it reminded me that I think a lot of people who've made a classic album kind of have that relationship with it. You know, Nas said earlier, I'm not doing no more Illmatic stuff. I remember Kurt Cobain said at toward the end of his life that he didn't even like performing Smells Like Teen Spirit anymore. So in your case, how do you approach it? Because you know people will always love that album, but at the same time, sometimes it overshadows your newer stuff. People just want to hear that same album that they remember when they were in college, when they were in high school. So how do you feel about that? How do you kind of make sure you can still veer people to your newer stuff and not just keep them stuck on that first album?
Well, for me, I started this interview saying it's bittersweet. Bitter was, I guess, the part of, that making my first album wasn't like the best experience, but the sweet part is that for me, I love performing it 20 years later, like all throughout it. I never felt like it's music I don't want to perform or like, oh, they want me. Like, I know why they like it because it's good. Like,
Right.
And I also know why, because a lot of people didn't get to see me perform. And, so if that's what they hear, I've been that audience member too. Like when I see Faith Evans, I want to hear the first album. And I don't want to hear bits of it, bits and bits. I want to hear her do the first verse, the second verse, the chorus, the bridge, the vamp, the outro. Like I want to hear all of it. So I understand how people can feel that way. So I guess because, I got into the music industry as a professional at 23. So I had 23 years, even though that's still very young, I had 23 years of not being in the industry and not just being a fan of music. I did always sing, but I never knew I was gonna be a singer like that, So I still had that whole mentality of like, no, I know why people want to hear Golden Boys the way Golden Boys went on the album, and I'm okay with that. What I do is I always perform. If I want people to hear my new songs, I perform, less of how I do and, some of the new stuff. But in every performance I do, you're going to hear some of those songs because I know that's what people want to hear. And I like pleasing people on like when I'm on the stage, like I don't want people coming to my show and being like, oh, she did a bunch of songs I don't know. I like seeing people, rock with me and enjoy it. And the way I keep it fresh is for a long time, I would just go to a city. And for a couple of reasons, I would just go to a city, fly out by myself, hire the band would be hired that's there. And I would send the music like a couple of weeks in advance. And when I get there, we do a rehearsal and then do the show. And when you incorporate new musicians, you're gonna get the music played to you in a different way that for me was exciting enough. Like just by hearing someone else's rendition of how they played that guitar part, even though it still was in the parameters of here and here, it's still like every artist, every musician plays their instrument completely different than another. So that is what kept it alive for me and fresh and exciting and, and till this day.
I appreciate you mentioning that because I want to say I've seen you live. First time was '07. I think it was at Sugar Hill nightclub. It's not even there anymore in downtown Atlanta. Now I think it was like in 2010, 2011. You always had sometimes you had a full band, sometimes you did acoustic performances. Which one is easier to kind of do? Because I'm always wondering with the music being so eclectic, I feel like the musicians have to be that as well. Like if you got like a standard jazz musician, they might struggle because that's just their one genre. It feels like you need those versatile musicians to really bring out the sound. So you do better with smaller bands or bigger bands?
I do well with the band that I've rehearsed with the most. Because the music, to be honest, the music isn't hard to play. It's not, Stevie Wonder music, his music is hard to play. Like if you are a musician, trying to play his music is completely hard to play. I've heard that like numerous times. My music is very A, B, A, B. This is this is how it goes. This is not how it goes. But with the guitar parts, it's so many different guitar parts that it depends on, as a guitarist, which part you hear as the most prominent part,
Right.
So for me, it's super easy to do acoustic sets with me and a guitarist that's an amazing guitarist because he has to know how to play to fill up the other space. There's some guitarists that can play the guitar part and a little bass note so it keeps it going. But it's easy, basically, like whoever, if I have a lot of time with a band, it doesn't matter who it is. It's just about the amount of time you have to like play it. And then some musicians actually, they are really great because they learn music and they can play music like they've known it for years and just listening to it once. So it all depends on the musician, but that's like the fun part. I've had some disasters where I had a whole full band and I was ready to go out with the whole full band and, hired them and got to the rehearsal. And I was like, no, y'all not the ones. Guitar player is going to be me and you tonight.
Wow.
And I had to I'm like, y'all can come to the show, and I had to do that one time in like New York, like opening up for like a De La Soul or something concert. And I was like, what am I going to do? And I'll never forget Ali Shaheed was like, okay, focus. He's like, look, this is not the end of the world. It's all about intentions. So if you just go out there with the intentions of putting on a great show, singing your heart out, it's not going to matter if you have the whole band or one guitarist. Go out there. Because I was going to cancel it. And he was like, no, it's about intent. And that was the best advice that was the best advice I could have gotten that night and that I've gotten in a long time. And I appreciate him for that. And I'll never forget him for that. And I went out there with just me and the guitar player, and the rest of the band just watched. Because I was like, y'all don't know the music. Y'all did me a disservice because y'all didn't even learn the music. Like, so.
That's true. That's true. Now, you mentioned earlier in the interview that some of your friends thought you were depressed going through the process because it was so rough, getting everything done. So that reminded me, fans sometimes, it sounds messed up to say, you'll hear them say, "Oh, I wish so and so was depressed because they make better music." Remember, we used to hear that about Mary J. Blige when she did My Life. It's like, "Oh, we need her back on coke and all that mess."
It wasn't just the fans. The label thought that too, because I was signed to that label at the time.
Really?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
everybody thought that one, and I was just like, that's kind of whack.
And then you even hear that, you go back in the day, same thing with Billie Holiday. People would say, when she was going through stuff, the music was better, you felt it more. So my question for you, do you make better music under pressure like that? Or do you need to be, is it better when you're in a better place and a happy place when you're creating?
I'm the opposite. My situation, let me not let everybody just think my situation like it was like we were fighting in cats and dogs. At the end of the day, that was a part of it. The other part was that I was 20, 21 years old. For the first time, I moved out of my parents' home and I was living in New York City. I could shop every day. I had money to do whatever I wanted. All I had to do was go to the studio and sing songs and deal with these personalities. That was the worst part of it. But at the end of the day, I didn't have to work at Starbucks. No slight to people working at Starbucks, but just saying I didn't have to have a 9-to-5 job. So it was still like a pleasure to just be like, oh, I live in New York. I live in downtown Manhattan. I can do what I buy what I want, go on vacations when I want, do all this stuff and make this album. And all I have to do is sing, And so that was like the great part of it. And because I was so comfortable financially making that album, I almost felt for a long time like that's the only way I can make music. I don't want to be sad if I'm sad and I'm stressed about finances or a boyfriend or this, like that's where my focus is, because as far as I was concerned, I wasn't even an artist yet. I was just a singer, and I was just a girl that was like, I got this opportunity to make an album. So I wasn't even in that mode. Years went by and I've had all types of ups and downs, and it kind of changed. I kind of evolved where I never before, I wasn't really writing a lot of stuff early on. So when I made my second album, that's still is like technically not out or whatever, but it kind of is, Black Girls Rock. That was my first time going in and writing about what I felt and me taking on all the writing. And then afterwards, I made another album. I made another 2 albums, and that last one I made that I'm gonna release like probably next year or something, or whenever I can get it all together. Well, it's done now, but as far as the business part together, that album was the first album that I made from not a happy place and not my life like feeling like it's in shambles and oh my God, my boyfriend this and my finances that, and I'm getting sued by Talib, and I'm doing, all this crazy stuff was going on at the same time. And, and that album's a banger too. And it's called Reset. So that was the first time I made music under like distress. Like I left where I lived in California and I was just like, I'm going to work with this songwriter in New Jersey, and I'm going to go there for a month. And when I go there, that means I'm not making any income. I will not know how I'm paying my rent the next month. I ended up staying there 2 months because I was like almost finished, but not. And I wanted to finish the album. And I just went back to LA like, yeah, I owe y'all like 2 months rent. I don't know how I'm going to pay. But the album is incredible. So, things kind of change, now it's you grow up too, and you're like, okay, life isn't always going to be peachy keen. So you're going to have to do what it do. And for the first time I wrote about like things, the negative things I guess I was going through, but it's like an album about being a hero. You have a moment in your life where it's dark, and then the things that you learn in that dark moment, the things that, you may feel bad or whatever, but then slowly you start creeping out of it. And once you creep out of it, all the stuff that you learned about yourself, and then you see yourself, get yourself out of that, you learn a lot about yourself. And that's what I brought really to the table with that album. It's like a story of the things that happened, but then also like I brought myself out of it, just like a true hero. So, and that's the album called Reset.
You're definitely a survivor of things you've gone through over the past few years. And it reminded me of something I hear a lot of women say that have been in the business. You want to work with different people. You might go to the studio thinking, we're going to work, and then the guy's propositioning you for something else. And I know a lot of people that kind of breaks their spirit. They just get out of the business completely. They're like, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of dealing with it. What made you, even after that situation with Talib, where I think you still have music over there that you may never get back, and that, you're leaving the creative part of yourself over there. How were you able to overcome that and not have that just, kind of break your creative spirit?
Well, I'm gonna be honest, it was a situation where I think that was the purpose of the lawsuit and stuff, like to break me, because it was almost like an offensive lawsuit where, because I didn't do anything wrong. So it was just someone suing you just to like stop you from doing something, which is like kind of like the lowest ball of like suing someone. Like they didn't do anything, but you're just suing them just to stop their shit. And, I was like really sad during the time, but I didn't want to give up either. I was like, this dude is not going to be the end of me. Like this nigga didn't make me. You know what I'm saying? Like I came around him as a signed artist by the president of the label, and then went to the next label and was and the first person, the first week the president got to the label, he was talking to me too, like you're an artist, But that really, it was a tough situation. I wrote an album through it. Some of those songs are about that situation. But I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior, like I'm a hero. I'm not going out like that. But it was a weird time, to have someone that close to you just kind of turn on you, and knowing that you weren't the one that did anything wrong, but they did it as an offensive move. But that music, it's funny because I got to correct you, like that music now, I can use it because he didn't go through
Okay.
with the lawsuit. He got to a certain point, and it's like we're at the point where it's like we need to go to depositions, which means that's when you get interrogated, and you get interrogated by my lawyer, and your lawyer can ask me a million and one questions too. And then after that, the judge reads that and hears that, and then you present your evidence as to why I'm not at fault. And I have proof of why, I'm the contract that he thinks we had, that contract that is over. It doesn't even exist anymore. And it didn't exist then. So, we got to that point, and all of a sudden he was like a ghost. It was like he was just trying to like make me spend money. You know what I mean? Because at
Right.
the time I had did an Indiegogo campaign, which he did not want me to do when I was signed to him. He was like, no, but I'm like, you don't have enough money to like promote this and do this. So why don't we do this, an Indiegogo? And he's like, no, that'll make you look bad, blah, blah, blah. So when everything went to shit, I just did it. I raised $38,000, and then a lot of it had to go, then I got sued by
Um,
him. So you immediately have to get a lawyer, and that's like 15 grand, like right there. So, it was definitely an offensive move to like, in a nasty way, to like stop an artist from doing their stuff. And once music is, said, like named in a contract or named in a lawsuit, you can't go to Amazon and put it out, because then that person can say, well, I'm suing them for it. Then everything gets stopped. So that was a situation, but he didn't go on with the lawsuit because it was a frivolous lawsuit from jump. You feel me?
right.
So he just pretty much went away, and I actually need to like go and get paperwork saying that, this isn't even real anymore, that it's over. I'm actually waiting for the judge to hit me back to be like, this is thrown out, because it's just sitting on her desk, because he needs to do certain things so we can go back to court and do the next step with his depositions. But if you can't prove what you say this person did, do you really want to go to depositions? You don't. So I'm actually like out of that. I feel like I'm done with that situation now. And it was just a major way to try to block, me from moving on and like onward and upward, And for a lack of better, like it worked for a little bit of time, because I was definitely like, it was taking a lot of my time and energy to like basically, fight for, you know, to fight. He was suing me for like $60,000. It was just like, are you crazy? You know? served me paperwork right before I went on stage at a show. Like this dude was out for, blood. But, I'm happy you asked about it, because people need to know. I mean, sometimes the person that's the loudest is not always correct. The first person to tell the story isn't usually, people, if you're the first person to tell a story like that, usually people believe you first, just because you were the first one. It's like psychology, but I mean, this dude is like, his tactics are like equal to Trump's to me, just being like, it's like that crazy. He's like that crazy. So I'm glad I'm past it. It was really tough, but I'm past it and moving on. And I'm about to, release this 20th anniversary next year with Universal Music Group. And I just couldn't be happier because, I got through it. I got past it. And it's like, you tried to sue me and it was like, no, bro. Like, I'm not gonna lay down and take it. Never.
Definitely. We're definitely going to be looking forward to that Universal project. So go a little bit into that. What exactly are you going to be doing as far as the scale to celebrate the 20th anniversary with them?
Well, it's one of those things where I really, really wanted, the album is not in print anymore. You can only get it digitally. If you go online and you try to buy the vinyl, it's pretty expensive, like way over, like it's like $100 and something dollars. Sometimes it's like, I saw one for like $400, like it's expensive. And because it's out of print and it's only one pressing of it. So I'm in the process right now. I'm at the very end of it, where I'm getting a license to press up vinyl of How I Do. And I'm getting the license to press up vinyl of a remix album for How I Do. The remixes that were done in the past were very much like, I didn't really have much to do with them. The label picked, who they wanted to pay to do a remix, and I didn't really have a choice. I did have a choice with Nas. I definitely wanted Nas to do it, but at the time, to be brutally honest, I wasn't feeling the remix that he did, and I saw him once, and I like asked him to like redo it, and he was just like, no.
Wow.
Yeah, but I tried. I was just like, I'm gonna ask him, like, shoot, I don't, I was on my regular reg, like I seen him in Baja Fresh in LA. I'm like, with him and his posse, and I was like, I was like, hi, Nas. Like, it's Reese. Like, you did a remix for me. My name is Reese. I'm signed. Like, I did the whole thing. And he was really nice about it. But it was basically like, it's a job to him. Like, I'm sure he loves his job, obviously, in his creativity. He was super nice. But at the end of the day, like, he's not going to redo it just because I want him to redo it. It's like, I'm going to have to pay him again, So we kept the remix. People like it. So that's what it's for. But this time around, I'm gonna actually remake the entire, pretty much the entire record over. I don't know if I'm gonna do it just, just like house remixes, or if I'm gonna just have my partner Steve McKee like do certain songs over and get some other DJs to do other stuff. But I definitely have the license to do it, and to press it up and to sell vinyl of not only the original album but also the remix album. So I encourage everyone to, support it when I do, get all of it together. It'll be out before June of 2022. And yeah, like, I'm the licensor, and it's kind of a big deal because, getting the license to get your own music back, to actually remix it and get like the original files and stuff, it's incredible. Like, it's like unheard of. And I was very relentless with reaching out. I mean, I literally called one person that I thought had like, a heavy influence in the label. I won't name his name, but I called him for 3 years straight. Like, hi, this is Reese calling. I want to do this, that. Hi, this is Reese, and finally, like, I got through, and, it's going to happen.
That's fantastic to hear.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Super excited. And just to let people know, any artist that is in the situation where they have like a classic album or any music that's out of print, go back and try to get the license for it, because you'll make more money off of it late, like now, than you will when you made it. you'll make more money.
Now, does that also entail like the masters and everything? All that falls into that when you after
Well,
you get the license back?
well, when I get the license, I still won't own it because technically, I signed a record deal in like 1998 or something, and the record deals were like this thick. And,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, they cover everything. And quite frankly, the label paid for it. The nature of the deal is they are hiring me to create an album. They pay for where I live, they pay for my car, they paid for me to move wherever I wanted to move, they paid for the studio, they paid for the person that took the pictures, they paid for Doc, they paid for Santi, they paid for all of our meals, they paid for all the guitar rentals I wanted to, like, they paid for everything. They paid for the marketing, they paid for everything. So they own it. You feel me? But they're letting me license it. So when I press up vinyl, then that's on me to do. And you guys will be buying it from me, not them. As far as the masters are concerned, I'm going to probably get a copy of them, and of the original files though, like a copy of them. And because everything got transferred, I have stuff on 2-inch reels, which are virtually not even used anymore. It's like old technology. So they took that and they actually digitized it, I guess the word is, and they put it in like digital files. So I can now go through Pro Tools on a computer and go back and hear everything that we recorded back then. So I'm going to get access to that. And with that is what I'm going to recreate the remix album for.
Perfect.
So
Perfect. Well,
gonna be
we're
great.
definitely looking forward to that. Absolutely. Absolutely. So to switch gears a little bit, um, you surprised me when we were talking earlier. I mentioned I was working on an organized crime book, and it's actually about these brothers that lived in the 1920s and 30s in Brooklyn that were active in Murder Inc. and a lot of the mafia organizations back then. But you told me that you have a street connection, which, tell the people that story that you were telling me earlier.
Well, I grew up in Philadelphia, or grew up in the suburbs of Philly. I was born in Philadelphia. My dad is my dad. He passed away about 10 years ago. He always was a number writer, and people are like, "What's a number writer?" It's basically the illegal lottery. It's the street numbers, they call it. It's if you ever saw Malcolm X and you see Malcolm X like going to church and he's like sitting in church, like asking the lady, like, what's the number for today? What you want to play? And then he writes it on a piece of paper. She gives him a little bit of money. He takes it back to the number house. My family owns number houses. So that's like what my family business was. But they also, broaden it with, doing construction and owning corner stores and, which they did the numbers in. And, they did that in the past. And it's something that's like a dying thing now. Um, Honestly, like drug dealing and all that other kind of stuff kind of like took over. But it was something that from in the 70s, in Philly, Baltimore, Chicago, like it's what was going down. And, and I owe a lot to it. It was a situation that taught me a lot, taught me a lot about character. These stores are stores that I worked in since I was like 6 years old, me and my sisters and my brothers. And I learned a lot, from the people in the neighborhood, from my father, it was a family owned business. So my uncle and my grandfather worked in the same store. And, it was on some gangster stuff. Sure, yeah.
And that is kind of like the American way because there's a lot of our families, when a lot of us go back into our history, that's how we were able to get a leg up and get legitimate starting out in the
Exactly.
streets because we really had no other option. And even look at somebody like the Kennedys, they started out in bootlegging. You see where they went all the way to the White House eventually.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
you
and
know,
that was a way. It's important that you say it was a leg up because it was the way to get to a legit business. But it definitely served the community. If you were a number runner or you owned the corner store that had the numbers in it, you were the block captain. You were the dad of the block. You provided for people that needed. You were. I remember my dad would. He's always putting something on somebody's commissary. He's giving food away to people if they don't have it until like 3 days from now or something. Or it was the store where people came there for refuge, to be honest. And that's what I saw growing up, and the importance of it, and and how who else was going to be there for the Black community? You know, because we, you know, if something went down and you needed protection, you could go there to that corner store. If you were, you know, if your kids were coming home from school and you know nobody was home, you could send them there and they could sit up at our store and just do their homework. Or, you know, we had like arcade games in there, and we sold like nickel candy and 10-cent candies, and Alexander the grapes and red hots and now laters and peppermint balls for the old people, pork rind. Like, you know, we sold everything, loose cigarettes. We were doing, you know, and you know, we take the EBT card. Like, it's like it was a community thing. So it's not all, everything isn't all, you know, negative. You know, street justice ain't always bad. You feel me? When I look at Snowfall, it you know, that's the vibe. It was like a snowfall, like that television show with Damon Idris. It was kind of like that. Like when I look at that show, it feels so familiar, man. Because I guess because it was in the 80s when my parents were doing it, in the 80s and the 90s, you know, so, or 70s, you know. So, you know, it was all right, you know. It was okay. I learned a lot and I don't regret it. And I, you know, it made me who I am today. Shout out to everybody in North Philly.
Shout out to North Philly. So last question, we got a couple minutes left. As you know, the site is called Beats Boxing Mayhem. So I covered the boxing match last night between Shakur Stevenson and Jamel Herring. And you mentioned that you had a boxing connection and you have some very vivid early memories of boxing. Let us know those memories you were talking about before.
Yeah, well, you know, Philadelphia is a boxing town. We used to have this venue called the Blue Horizon where local boxers would go and fight there, right? And it was set up pretty much like a mini, like what you would think like a mini boxing arena or whatever would be, you know, the thing in the middle, everybody around it, like a mini like Vegas situation. And I remember I would go there with my dad. And I remember one of the first times I went there was the first time I realized there was a difference between like women and men and boys and girls. And it was so crazy because it was, you know, me and my sister were daddy's girls, you know, we were like up under him. And it was like, wow, for the first time when the girl, it was only one other girl there. And it was like me, my sister, and one other woman. And the woman was the girl in the bikini holding the number sign, like to say round one, you know, or round two, or round three. And the reaction that she got versus the reaction like anybody else got going in the ring was so noticeable that it made me for the first time realize, wow, okay, we're different. You know, I definitely was a tomboy growing up. So in my eyes, I just was like, just like the boys, one of the boys, like it didn't faze me. But it definitely was like the most defining moment of you are a woman and your body and what you look like is different than all these men, and just their reaction was like crazy. And it wasn't like vulgar, or at least at the time it didn't appear that way to me. It just appeared like, wow, like we are different. I am a little girl because I'm going to grow into be that, you know, and you know, a woman, and these men are like, we're different. You know, it was one of those moments. And I think a lot of women and girls go through that. They just don't realize when it actually happens, when you realize you're different, you know, or when you realize your you know, your womanhood, I guess it is, you know. So
Right. It's interesting how to go about explaining that, because you can also look at it as also women or girls realizing that they have power, you know, or power over men to a degree, you know,
right.
and how you rationalize that and how you grow to understand that. So it's very interesting. It might be a good song topic for you in the future.
I know, yeah, I think it is. You know, also with the store and my dad's corner store, growing up working there, it was definitely like, you know, it was a very male dominated environment. You know, gangster shit ain't really, you know, there ain't a lot of ladies. And although my aunt Barbara, she was the one that started the whole family into it, and she was like the mastermind of it. But and she passed the business down to my dad. But you know, it still was something different to actually see that, and but it also prepared me for the music industry in a way, because that's another male dominated situation and work environment, and I definitely knew how to engage with men in a way to make them not just look at me like, oh, I'm trying to get with you. I'm trying to get with you. You know, it will be how I dressed when I went to the studio or when I went to work at my dad's store. You know, my dad was the type that was like, if a little boy or a man or whoever was in the store a little bit too long because they're like talking to me or engaging, he was like, oh, I got a shotgun. Like, you know what I mean? So I knew early
Right.
on, like, okay, my dad is going to freak out if the, you know, and then you realize when you're in another environment years later, you realize how to talk to people to make them talk to you and not talk at you. You know, how to play a role of like, oh no, I'm like your little cousin, or like, I'm like more like your little sister, or, you know, versus I'm this sexual like object, you know, at least that's what I thought, you know, at the time. But I think it also has a lot to do with how men perceive you, you know, and also what you speak and how you speak and what you talk about and what you don't talk about and what you tell them, like, no, that's not proper. Like, that's not something we need to talk about, or, you know, certain conversation you don't let go on, you know. And I learned a lot of that kind of like people skills and social skills from working in that store, to be honest.
Well, I really appreciate your time. It's been a great conversation. We're definitely going to be looking forward to that Reset album next year and the remastered, relicensed version of How I Do. I know people are going to eat that up. You know, I will definitely be getting the vinyl once that's available. So just to let everybody know, where can they find you out on social media just to keep up with all these projects you have coming next year?
Well, you can find me mostly on Instagram. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, but Instagram is the one that I'm more day to day, you know, hands on. But I will be posting on all of those platforms. And my name on Facebook is Reese Artist, RESARTIST, Reese Artist. And then I have another Facebook that's Reese Fans, and that's one word. And then for Twitter and Instagram, I'm at the one RES. So THE #1 RES. So definitely hit me up on those. I do respond to people, and I see every message, whether you think I do or not. And yeah, that's, you know, the 20th anniversary of How I Do is coming up. I just want to thank everybody who's been riding with me thus far. I mean, it's been a great ride. It had some ups and downs, but you know, that's real life. And I'm still here. I'm still making music. I'm going to be in Chicago October 30th at the Wintrust Arena, performing new songs and old songs. I'm the opening act, so please come early. And there's going to be a lot of great other, you know, artists and musicians like El DeBarge, Brian McKnight performing. So just, you know, hit me up on Instagram and look there for flyers. I'm also DJing now. That's like a new love of mine. It just keeps me connected with music, and like just I get to play all my favorite songs. I have an eclectic mind and choice for music, you know, the music selection part. And I've just been enjoying it. I just did the Barnes Museum in Philadelphia, and that was really great for their like monthly young professionals party. And yeah, just look out for me either DJing or performing. And yeah, that's what I'm doing now.
I think you might need to squeeze in the fitness tape in there too, because it looks like you haven't gained a pound since the They Say Vision, because you look like exactly the same. So
I know it's crazy, right? I definitely have gained a pound or two, but I feel like I haven't aged since like last Wednesday, and I'm even surprised too sometimes. But I do, you know, I do take care of myself, and I definitely exercise. I try to eat right, but sometimes I don't. You know, now I realize I need to be like gluten. I'm gluten intolerant, so I had to cut all that stuff out, which helps a lot. And yeah, other than that, you know, I think it's just, you know, I'm a good person. And when you're a good person, you look good, you know, when you look good, you feel good and you are good. So
exactly. That's a perfect way to end. Well, now you are family. You are welcome back anytime, especially when you have these projects dropping. We'd love to speak with you again, and definitely
great.
appreciate your time.
Thank you guys for having me. And yeah, look out for me next year and this year. More
Thank
to
you.
come.
Thank you.
All right.